Here's Brody Brazil.
You know that old saying that time flies when you're having a good time? I guess that could apply to the current San Jose Sharks, now halfway through their 2021-22 campaign, and it does feel like just yesterday that it was opening night, we were starting the season. 41 games in now, precisely halfway through the regular season at this moment, and that's usually a fair time to assess where a hockey team's been, who they are right now, and what they could potentially be by the end of this regular season. So that's the point of this video. Who are the Sharks? I'm going to make 10 statements about the team in just a second. But first, let's dive into their vitals, where they stand right now. A 21-18-2 record that has them at 44 points, which has basically kept them hovering around the middle of the pack in the Pacific Division. And as of right now, they're in a playoff spot, the second wild card of the Western Conference. 6-1 in overtimes. That is important. We can dive into that a little bit later too. 11-8-2 at SAP Center, as opposed to 10-10-0 on the road. So a fair balance of games home and away, and a similar record. I mean, a little bit better at home, but overall pretty similar record home and away. Let's look at the team's performance by division. 7-4-0 against the Atlantic. They have played a ton of games against the Atlantic. In fact, the Sharks have more wins right now against the Atlantic than they have total games against their own Pacific Division. That's crazy. It's obviously going to balance out, but it just goes to show you how schedule heavy it has been to the East for San Jose so far. 5-5-2 against the Metro Division, 6-6-0 against the Central, and 3-3-0 against the Pacific. Now, that bottom one is going to have to improve. Obviously, it's a small sample size right now, but if you want to get into the playoffs, those divisional games and the points you get and the points you deny are ultimately most important. More vitals for you here. It was a really good start to the season. 4 wins in their first 4 games, a 5-3-0 record total in October. They kept it rolling in November, and that was the span of COVID really hitting the team. 7 players and the head coach were sidelined for almost 2 weeks. 7-6-1 in November, 5-5-0 in a pretty segmented December. And then here in January so far, it's actually been their worst month. 2-4-2 in the first month of 2022. Couple more things to get to here. In terms of close games versus not close games, the Sharks are really good in 1-goal games this year. 11-3-2 in games decided by the slimmest of margins. But also in games decided by 3 or more goals, they typically don't win those blowouts. 6 wins, 11 losses, and none in overtime or a shootout when games are decided, obviously, by 3 or more. Wait, how could a game be decided by 3 or more in overtime or a shootout? Never mind. I digress. So let's move on here. Through 41 games, again, we're precisely at this halfway point. Who are the Sharks? I'm going to make these 10 statements. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree with these? These are my big picture, overall observations. Let's begin with this. The Sharks are better defensively than they were last year. And I'm talking about team defense. I'm also talking about goaltending here. James Reimer and Adin Hill have been spectacular. Their stats indicate it, but I also think the Sharks have just been more structured, more responsible, less turnovers in front of their netminders. There's been a lot less odd man rushes against San Jose. There's been a lot less second, third, and fourth chances in front of San Jose's own goal. These were things that plagued the team for the last several years. And sometimes it made Martin Jones and Aaron Dell and Devin Dubnyk look bad, but the Sharks have tightened up defensively. There's no question about it. The Sharks are also noticeably short up front. Now, as compared to their blue line, I think San Jose is pretty set. A reliable, combination of multiple different pairs of D-men. I think the Sharks are set with their blue line, but it's up front this season, forward-wise, where I think they've been noticeably short, and in 2 ways. I definitely think they've been missing the services of another top 6 forward, and let's just state the obvious. They had one signed on their team in Evander Kane. He never played. That's a whole separate issue, but that type of player those types of contributions, I really do feel like the team has been missing that on multiple occasions when they go through scoring slumps or their power play. I mean, just add another 20 or 30 or 40 goal scorer to your team through this season, through this first half, and think about how many more wins it might equate to for the Sharks. But that's not the only area. It's not just a top six forward. I feel like the third and fourth lines for San Jose, I mean, obviously points and goal and assist-wise, they haven't contributed to the level of the top six, but I don't know if there's always been identities and staples associated with the third and fourth lines. The Sharks in the second half could really use the development of their third and fourth lines. And again, doesn't mean you have to score every game or every night or even every other night, but allow your contributions to be noticed. And yeah, I'm not going to say they haven't been productive. I mean, look at special teams like the penalty kill, for example. Those players have been very productive on special teams, but I'm talking about even strength here. You just need a little bit more from your third and fourth lines if you're San Jose. All right, the Sharks are road tested. You just saw their schedule, how many games they've already played against Eastern Conference opponents. They only have, these next handful of games, they only have one more trip out to the Eastern time zone, and that's it. They have done the heavy lifting of their schedule this season, travel-wise, so I want to make it very clear. They've played a relative balance of home and road games, but all those road games have been 2,000 and 3,000 miles away. So it's all going to greatly help the Sharks when they're staying in California, for example, basically the entire month of February. They've already done a lot of heavy lifting out on the road. The Sharks are rookie laden. I like the way I phrase that. I'm going to be honest with you, pat on the back there, rookie laden. And that's not a bad thing. 15 rookie debuts for the Sharks this season leads the entire NHL. No other club in the league of the other 31 teams, no team has debuted more rookies this year than the San Jose Sharks. Now, you could say, what if they had a little bit more veteran core of players to turn to? What if they didn't have to use all those rookies? And that would be fine, but I think it's also a statement about these rookies that many have come in, many have not rocked the boat. They've done their job. Some have excelled. Some have been noticed. Some are going to stick. But if you're the Sharks, it does need to be stated that they have gone through a lot of different players this season, and for a multitude of different reasons. Injuries, COVID protocol, some players not just simply not performing. You want to give chances. So again, it's been a transitional season as much as any other for the Sharks. They tried to get a little bit more veteran this year, players like Bonino and Cogliano coming in, but they are still relying on their youngest players on a pretty regular basis. The Sharks are bought in here in 2021-22. They have bent at certain periods. They've lost a couple games in a row that were ugly and unfortunate. And, those things do happen. But what I think is most noticeable, and especially when we compare them to seasons prior, this team has not unraveled yet. And I think a big reason why is because the Sharks are bought in. This team has a better chemistry. They've got a better outlook. It's been noted on many occasions before. I've said it as well, too. Just look at the captain's face. Logan Couture maybe has fought through the prior couple seasons, and he's been the captain, and he was, put in charge, leader by example, leader of the team wearing the C. And it's been frustrating times for the team on the ice, maybe with issues off the ice, dealing with a lot of extra things right now. But you can tell this season that on a pretty regular basis, they are bought in. They know their structure. They talk about it. They talk about playing the right way. They talk about playing for each other. They stand up for each other. Jeffrey Viel, I want to point and single him out as a player specifically doing that. So I don't think there's any question the Sharks are bought in this year way more than they were last year and even the season prior to that. And let me also give a little bit of credit to Bob Boughner. He's the head coach. He's the one who's got to initiate this. If you're not selling something proper or selling something that people want, they're not going to buy into it. But the Sharks do seem bought in this season. All right, next one here. The Sharks are good in overtime. A 6-1 record, plus, as I mentioned before, those 11 wins this season by the slimmest of margins in 1-goal games. So really, obviously, 6 of those 11 coming in overtime, but that just goes to show you when it comes to the clutch, the Sharks have kind of been there this year in a lot of close games down the stretch. Now, it's not always to say that they've managed games well when they had a bigger lead and then it got a little bit too narrow, or they shouldn't have dug themselves an early hole, but I think it's a fair assessment to say that after 60 minutes, when games are tied, you've got a pretty good feeling that although they might have squandered a point to the opponent, they are likely going to get the 2 points. They're very good 3-on-3. They've got dynamic playmakers. They possess the puck well. Overtime is definitely about that in the National Hockey League. So, that matters when it comes to total points in the standings. Obviously, in the end, when it comes to tiebreakers, regulation, and overtime wins are far more important than shootouts. It's important that the Sharks end games with 2 points in overtimes as opposed to the shootouts. So a 6-1 record. It was 6-0 for a while until that recent first loss. The Sharks are needing more on the power play. And I say that in 2 ways. Number 1, drawing penalties. And number 2, actually converting with goals. Let's begin with the first half of this. At a recent check, the Sharks were drawing among the fewest penalties in the NHL. You could sit there and say, well, the refs aren't blowing the whistle enough for San Jose, and I'm not even going to go that far. I do think officiating this year, hit or miss sometimes. Overall, pretty predictable. Let's not get it twisted here, but the real thing is that the Sharks are not doing enough with the puck to be dangerous to draw these penalties. If the opponent can't stop you, that's when they're going to hook you. That's when they're going to trip you. That's when they're going to slash you. You're not making the opponent make mistakes. So I think that has to be said, and maybe that's part of missing another top 6 forward up front. So there's one half of it. The other side of it is just that the Sharks as of late have not been converting on the power play, and to an extent that, before the famous Timo Meier 5-goal game, the Sharks were, I think, 2 for their prior 26 in 10 games on the power play. Not just that, 2 for 26, that's 8%, I want to say. They had allowed 3 goals, 3 shorties in those 26 power play opportunities. They allowed 3 and scored 2 on the power play in their prior 10 games. So there's no question that the power play has some ironing out to do in the second half. It just has to be more productive for the Sharks, getting on it more and then capitalizing on it more. We'll move on to this, the other side of it on special teams. The Sharks are reliable on the penalty kill, and they have been all season. And credit to the players that have been getting this done. Obviously, they are different names, but some of them on the 3rd and 4th lines. But here they are in special teams, reliable on the PK at current stance, 7th in the NHL, clicking at 83%. But like I said, they were top 5 for, I believe, the first month or 2 of the season. The Sharks have made it important here that if they take a penalty, it's not always going to cost them. They're not necessarily going to lose momentum in a game. They've been a pretty good, disciplined team this season, I have to say. There's very few and far in between parades to the penalty box. But I do feel like even when they do take a penalty, they've been pretty reliable in killing it. And credit to the penalty killers. Who's always the most important penalty killer? Oh, yeah, that's your goalie. Adin Hill, James Reimer, I'll name them again. They've come up clutch this season. The Sharks are capable of playing up or down to their opponents. Now, if you just look at all the wins and losses this season, there are some that would catch your eye and say, wow, Sharks won that game against that team, and there's no question. There have been statement wins this year. And there also, in fact, have been some statement losses, games that you say, all right, well, you played those guys tough. I mean, you might have even been the better team, but you lost the game, and no such thing as moral victories necessarily, but you understand the effort was there and you like what you saw from the Sharks. That being said, those are against good teams. We've also seen some clunkers this year by the San Jose Sharks. In fact, the last game, the last 2 times, the only 2 times the Sharks have ever played the Kraken, they lost. They allowed a big second period in the game in Seattle as they scored 3 times, only 2 of them counted. But how about the first time the Sharks and Seattle met at SAP Center, December 14th? San Jose had a 1-0 lead. Seattle got the final 3 in the third period. Again, that's a last-place Kraken team. They're an expansion team. Sometimes playing down to the level of the opponent has been a characteristic of San Jose. So I got to say it, they've been capable of playing up or playing down to the opponents. If they could get that a little bit more consistent on the upside and a little bit less on the downside, I'm stating the obvious, it would help them in the long run. And then my last statement and comment about the Sharks through 41 games, this is number 10 of 10. The Sharks, in my opinion, are a playoff contender for 2022. And this is important because, quite honestly, it's an expectation now of the fans. The Sharks have never missed, in their 31 years, they've never missed 3 consecutive postseasons. They've missed 2 in a row a couple times, but never 3. This is the opportunity, after having missed the last 2 years, and interesting years, right? 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago, it was stopped short after 70 games. Last year, it was only 56 games, all in division. It was the pandemic season. I get it. They haven't been normal by any circumstance, but they've still never missed 3 years in a row. This is the opportunity to get back in that dance. And I'll say they're a playoff contender because I love their leadership. Tomas Hertl, 21 goals. Timo Meier, 21 goals. Logan Couture has actually struggled with the production, I would say, on a regular basis, but in terms of leadership, right there, you've got Brent Burns throwing out apples like they're going out of style. It's been a relative rebound season for Erik Karlsson offensively. Mario Ferraro continues to emerge. I could go on and on here with the names. But the bottom line is that the Sharks, I feel, have shown in the first half and shown through adversity and COVID protocols and off-the-ice stuff with Evander Kane and the schedule being a little bit more difficult. They have shown that they got through that pretty well. They're on pace for 88 points. I don't know what a playoff spot is going to require. And I'm not even saying that they'll even be top 3 in the Pacific Division. But I do feel like, looking at the pack and looking at the Sharks, I would not be surprised if they could crack the playoffs this year. Again, that's an important first step for this team to get back to that. And maybe they can make more steps. Hey, advance a round or 2. I don't know. We all understand how crazy things get in the postseason and how the hottest teams, can have instant success. But getting there is critical, and I firmly believe, that in the first half, the Sharks have shown that they are at least a contender. I'm not guaranteeing that they'll get there. I'm not making that bold prediction yet. But I am saying for sure they are good enough right now to be a contender. So that's it through 41 games. I've told you what I think the Sharks are. Now it's time for you. In the comment section below, tell me what you think the Sharks are through 41 games. Also, since you've watched this far, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel, and I cannot wait to see you next time.